Hello and welcome to Joe Jasper video. I'm making this mask tutorial at the request of one of my viewers who asked, can you give me a very simple tutorial? Well, I'll start out simple at least and see if we can go from there. Uh, as always, make sure you're viewing in high definition so that you can read these fine bits of lettering. And that's usually found down below to the right, a little gear, click on it and use the highest setting that your bandwidth will support. Paint Shop Pro is a trademark product of Corel. This is an amateur production and I don't receive any payment for this. So let's get started on answering the question of what are masks. There will be some slides. I'm going to try to save as many for them of them for the end as I can so that you can just run through them in order. But let's see why to call a mask layer a mask to begin with. And one of the easiest things is to think of it like putting masking tape on a wall, paint over the entire wall, peel off the masking tape to reveal the old underlying wall. And I'm going to demonstrate that right now in Paint Shop Pro. So I'm going to open up a new file. I'm going to create one from scratch, not a picture, just a blank wall that's 7 units by 5 units by 96, and my units are inches. And so this could be your living room wall painted white. Originally what comes up is a background layer. Notice I'm using palettes off to the right, so you're really familiar with layer materials palette, a history, and brushes probably. Any palette that you want to come up, you have to come over to View, Palettes, and click the ones you want. All right. So I'm leaving this pegged instead of auto hiding it now so that you can follow along easier. So here is your blank wall. And let's say you want to paint your wall blue, but you want to have a certain pattern that is not painted blue. We're going to do that using masks. First thing I usually do is come over into my layers palette and duplicate. Now I have background layer and copy of background. I'm even going to duplicate that one more time. That will become more apparent later why I tend to do that. And then a good idea is to take your background layer and lock it so that you're not allowed to make any changes to it. And that way you can always look back and see what your original had. Okay, our next step is to notice that the background layer is highlighted, and we don't want to work on that. We want to work on the top layer, the copy of background, and I'm going to rename that for mask. So if you rename every layer that you have for its intended purpose, then you can keep track later. Sometimes you may end up with many, many layers. What I want to do is think about painting this wall blue. So what I would normally do is create a new layer, and this is going to be a new layer of paint, and I'm going to fill it with a nice blue paint. Come over to my bucket fill it. I just painted that entire wall blue, but it's all blue. I don't want it all blue. I want to have a pattern in my wall. So what I can do is put down some masking tape to prevent the blue paint from sticking to the white wall. Let's do that. I have my extra layer that I called for mask, right? So I want to go back to my white wall as if I haven't put any blue paint on it yet. But I don't want to undo all the work I've done, so I'm just going to make that blue layer invisible by toggling the visibility off. You see the little eyeball? It's visible. turn off the eyeball, it's not visible. I'm going to come down to my 4-mask layer that we created, and I'm going to put down some masking tape. I think I'm going to make that masking tape black outline and black fill. I'm using a stencil 140. So this is just as if you've taken masking tape, used a stencil to cut it out, and stuck it to the wall. You'll see that Paint Shop Pro did that in another layer, and what I want to do is merge it down so that I now have a layer that's black and white that I can make my mask from. I'm going to come down to this little mask icon. The words that are off your screen say New Mask Layer. Left click and say From Image. We're using Source Luminance and say OK. And you can see that from this layer, a mask that looks identical is present. However, there is a very important difference. Mask layers behave differently, and they're only shades of gray. So if I click on this mask layer and look at my materials, you'll see that the palette that's available is only grayscale, whereas the layer that I took this from, if I click on that layer, you'll see that it has all the colors of the rainbow. I'm going to take our blue paint down here for a sec. And remember, this layer I only used in order to create this mask layer. I don't need it anymore, so I'm going to take it and throw it out. So here's our blank wall. Here's the mask I created. The mask is going to modify whatever changes I make in the layer immediately below it within its group. Here's the group for mask, containing the result, the mask, and whatever changes I'm trying to make. The changes I'm trying to make are affecting this layer just below the group. So I can turn on the visibility of my blue paint. The blue paint is affecting the layer below it. The mask, the black in the mask, is preventing any of that color, 100% prevention of this blue paint from sticking to this wall. The top layer is the result of this plus this minus the black in this, resulting in the top layer. If I turn off this, I'm back to my white wall. Okay, so I can merge this group down, right click, merge, merge group, and at the end one would just merge it all to see the difference. Here's before and after. I can go back because I haven't done anything permanent yet. And what if instead of blue I want pink? I don't have to redo all this work. I can just go over to materials, pick out a hot pink, go to bucket, change the color of that area, or I could use a picture, a photograph. Like so, and get rid of my color. So that's the quick and simple. At the end you would want to right click, merge all, and save with the file name so you can find your file later. Let's run through a few other quick examples of how to use masks. So let's do an experiment and create a mask for this more complex image. Here's a flower with a lot of detailed shapes to it, And I'm going to do our usual right click, duplicate, right click, duplicate, call this layer for mask. But instead of doing what we did before, I'm going to create a mask and say hide all. And you see black here. Now what if I come to my mask layer and I grab, let's say, a yellow color and a brush, and I have a pretty big size brush that I want to fit on this image. I got to make it much smaller. And I take that brush and I go like this. I don't see it. Why is that? Because I have a black mask that's not allowing any of those changes to take place. Here's the layer that I'm trying to here's the layer I'm trying to modify. Here's the layer I'm putting the modification in. And this is the mask that's influencing those modifications. So what if we now took that mask layer, grabbed a white brush, which I'm going to make smaller yet, and made a vertical slash on my mask so that it's no longer all black. And you can look over at the mask and see that it's black with a white stripe. And where that white intersects the yellow, now I'm allowing the change to show through. If instead of using white, I use a gray tone and do the same thing, come back to my mask layer and make a gray swipe, you'll see that a partial penetrance of that yellow color is now present because gray lets part of it through, but it's also still allowing part of this original image below to show through. Okay, so that's experiment number one. Let's get rid of those layers, those mask layers, and come back to what we had before. Now we're going to make a mask and we're going to say show all. Come back to the layer that we want to make the changes that will influence the layer below. So remember, here's the layer we want to change. This is our adjusting layer to make the changes to this layer that will be influenced by this mask. So this mask is going to either prevent or allow the changes I make to this layer from affecting this layer and the result shown up top. So again, here's our yellow stripe. Everything shows, all the changes that I made to this layer, because it's white in the mask, allows everything that I do to this layer to show through. I'm going to come to my materials and choose a black brush. Go to my layers dialog box. Choose the mask layer. And now I'll make a vertical stripe. And now the yellow disappears from over my flower because I painted it with black. So it could be pretty tedious trying to find all the edges of that flower by hand, and that's where experiment 3 comes in. So again, we're going to go to the history and get rid of the changes. If we look, there we are again, back to where we were. And this time I'm going to say mask from image source luminescence. Say OK. And I have my mask. But it's gray instead of black and white, and I want to just change the background of this flower. So I'm going to come up, while I have this mask layer highlighted, I'm going to go to Adjust, Brightness and Contrast, Levels, and a little dialog box comes up. Not so little right now. Let me make it little. And let me reset this. This is what it should look like if you've never used levels before. Here's a little histogram in the middle, our original, and any changes we make will show up there. I'm going to grab this right handle and bring it to the left until the background looks white. Oh, that's very white. It's making my flower look white. And then I'm going to grab my left handle and I'm going to bring it to the right until my flower is just about all black. Preferably it would be all black. I do have other detailed videos on chroma screen to show you how to make sure your mask is completely blackened in those areas of defect to touch it up, but here you can see the resulting image is still what we started with, but we need to make some magic by putting in a different background color. Let's say we want the background to be black. So I would click on this layer, make a new raster layer with these settings, say OK, and have a black as my foreground color. Grab a bucket and fill that raster layer in. And instantaneously we have our flower with a black background. I don't need this layer anymore. I just used it to create the mask, so we can get rid of it. And now any changes that we make here are trying to affect this layer, but being filtered by this mask to give this result for the combination of just the effect to influence this layer. So you can see there's no flower here because it's allowing this to show through. I can see right in here that there's a defect in my mask. So if I come back to my mask with a black paintbrush and paint over that spot, the white returns. Any other defects in the flower, I can come around. If I didn't like that color, I could put in a different background or different color. So there's a little quickie on basics of masks. I hope that helped you. Now here are the slides.